let's go to the last team. Last team is the one that happened to hoist the Lombardi for the second time in recent memory. The Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I know that there was a pretty much unanimous love for Howie at the end of the season. Bringing back Saquon, extending Saquon, bringing back Zach Bond. They have a lot of free agents. We know that they've traded CJ GJ. A lot of guys have left. Slay is essentially gone at this point. I think there's a weird contractual thing there, but Slay gone, Milton Williams gone, Isaiah Rodgers gone. Most of those guys ended up going to the AFC, which is great. I mean, if you're going to lose them, don't lose them to your own division. We saw Myles Garrett re-sign with Cleveland, so he's not going to Washington, so that's like another potential loss for the Commanders' hopes. But given all of the exodus that's happened, a lot of people thought that there were going to be this idea of run it back, that the players were going to take hometown discounts. We don't know yet about Mekhi Becton, but all indications seem to be pointing towards him leaving as well. Where are you at right now with the Eagles? Coming off a Super Bowl, but now with more holes to fill than maybe we initially expected them to going into the offseason.
It's hard not to have faith in Howie. Now, I have two views on this. One is I'm chilling. All right, I'm good. He told us it was going to be like this. I mean, he said it. So if he says, yo, listen up, it doesn't end at free agency. It doesn't end at the draft. There's a lot of work to be done. It might be unconventional. This is how it's going to go. And then when it starts to go that way, you can't start hitting panic buttons when I'm good. And then, there's also a side of me where we're talking Howie Roseman, right? Do you really think Howie Roseman is just not going to put together the best product he can? And from a very base vanilla view, is Howie Roseman really going to go, you know what? I don't care about being competitive this year. That would never happen. So knowing that, I have faith in it. Now, part of me does wonder, the biggest magician in the world with manipulating the cap, we might live in an era where even the best to do it after winning a Super Bowl might have some difficulties. That's like the other side of me, where as much as I trust him and he can do no wrong, sometimes he can, but he's very good, hit rate's good. There may be a truth to, this is just the nature of the beast that you have to accept. So he'll put together a competitive team. Maybe Ringo's not good enough at outside corner to win a Super Bowl, but if you go and re-sign Zach Bond, if you look at where we are with AJ and you pay the left side of your line and you have Lane Johnson getting restructured and, you're looking at all these things and you draft Quinion and Coop and Jalen Carter and down the road they need to get paid, but you can't wait until the end of their contract to pay them. You got to pay them earlier because that's how you manipulate the cap over the long haul. So that's part of the next step of the process. So when you look at all of it in totality, maybe. And look, last year people looked at this defense before the year started and thought, they're going to be middle of the road. And then you signed Bryce Huff and you went, wow, this is great. And the defense didn't even use Bryce Huff. So you reacted to the Bryce Huff news like it was great. It didn't even help out. And then those guys who you thought would be middle of the pack was number one in the league. So I just, Howie has earned so much wiggle room. It's not even funny. And I'm just resting on that. Whether it's fair or unfair, that's kind of how I view it.
I think you're a little bit generous. This is actually where you're going to probably be more generous with your number than I am.
Okay.
I am not an ungrateful guy, and I am very happy that I got to experience 2 Super Bowl wins. And I'm very happy that I got to experience that with 2 out of my 4 kids stayed up all the way through the end of the Super Bowl with my wife and I. And so that's like a nice core memory, and I'm grateful for that. And at the same time, there have been blind spots with Howie and with roster construction. And now I'm not saying that Zach Bond was a fluke, right? But Zach Bond was never the level of player that he was until last year. And I put a lot of that on Vic Fangio for being able to get the most out of him. Will we see the same level of player in Zach Bond next year? I don't know. I would almost like to believe, if I'm going to be as optimistic as possible, I want to believe that Milton Williams got paid.
Josh Sweat got paid to be Jalen Carter. You can't. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Josh Sweat got paid. Isaiah Rodgers found a better opportunity, better playing opportunity. Slay, the money never made sense for him to come back. There's a big part of me that wants to say Fangio is the guy that you rely on here. And that if Fangio really believed that you couldn't go back to the Super Bowl without Josh Sweat, I think Howie would have figured out a way to bring back Josh Sweat. So there's part of me that looks at it and says, I believe in Fangio maybe more than Howie when it comes to the personnel. I just don't know if you can get lucky 2 years in a row. Like, there are going to be so many more young guys that are now going to have to take a step up unless you go out and get a guy through a trade. I now worry with, like, CJGJ especially. Like, we saw the difference between making a Super Bowl with him on that defense. He leaves, he goes to Detroit, helps them kind of find that swagger. They bring him back, they win a Super Bowl. It's not to say that it was all CJGJ. Maybe he drove Fangio insane, and that's part of why he's not back. Like, we don't know. I'm sure somebody will write up, maybe Tim McManus or Jeff McClain, somebody will write up a big story about it after the fact, and they'll do the full breakdown of, like, why CJGJ is gone. But there's part of me that worries that when you let so many guys go at once, that you're almost tempting fate. You're almost smelling your own brand, and you believe that you can get it done with anybody, and that's where I worry. A little bit too much turnover.
Well, but I don't know, and this is where I would debate that is, I don't think there's a world where you can bring everyone back. I don't think there's a world where Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, CJGJ, Darius Slay, all these names that you want to bring back, I don't even think that's humanly possible. So I think that's just the nature of where the team is after they won. Guys are going to get paid. Clutch sports hoodies with Milton Williams on the day after they win a Super Bowl. That's a statement. So I don't even think that is plausible for Howie. Now, maybe Isaiah Rodgers, but if your team it falls apart because you didn't keep Isaiah Rodgers, then your team isn't where it, like, you need the staples. Jalen Carter's the staple. Quinyon Mitchell is the staple. There are staples, and then there are the rotational pieces or the starters who aren't elite players, but they're solid starter. That's Josh Sweat in my eyes, right? A solid starter. He's not game. I did in the Super Bowl, but over the long run, no one's going circling Josh Sweat saying that guy can't beat us today. No one does that. So you get the staples, and then you constantly kind of have to replenish the role players and the starters, and that's how you have to build. And I think the Eagles are doing a good job with that mentality. That's at least how I view it.
To be clear, I didn't expect or want them to keep all of those guys. Like, I assumed Williams was gone, Sweat would be gone. I look at the secondary because that's where, like, Quinyon and Cooper stepped up in such a big way and were so impactful immediately that when you look at that turnover where you do lose Slay, CJGJ, and Isaiah Rodgers, who, like, look, in fairness, how much of an impact did Isaiah Rodgers really have defensively? Debatable. And I'm not going to stand here and say, like, oh, James Bradbury's a huge loss. From a locker room perspective, it seems like Bradbury was, like, a fantastic vet in that room. But, like, I worry about losing all of that veteran leadership. Now, it's early, right? It's still very early in the offseason, and they might bring in somebody who blows our minds, or they might bring in a couple of guys, to your point, who are those rotational guys that kind of get added in here, bring that leadership, and it's all fine. I just look at it and I go, all right, I have concerns, but I'm not ready to jump off a ledge. So I'm going to throw it to you first for your score for Howie and your confidence in him being able to potentially rebuild, retool the roster into being, yet again, another Super Bowl contending team.
10. Wow. 10. Wow. I mean, this is the best of the best. It's the best of the best. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. I'm waiting.
Howie's done really well of late. Mm-hmm. Howie Roseman is still the same guy who gave Carson Wentz a contract too early.
And then got out of it because he knows how.
He did get out of it, but I think you get that move once in your entire career. A lot of money given to Bryce Huff. That did not work.
Won a Super Bowl.
Found Zach Bond for cheap. Had to give him almost record-breaking money to have him stay. I have to be fair, okay? I think the dynasty window is open. I do. Howie's no longer reluctant to draft guys from the SEC. But Howie's not infallible. 9.8. 9.8.
I'll take that.